Welcome to History in Flames. Empires rise and fall, the past comes alive in fire and ash. Subscribe and relive stories that shaped the world. Deep in the forests of Belarus, during the darkest years of the Second World War, something extraordinary happened. While millions were being murdered across occupied Europe, three brothers built a hidden village among the trees. It had workshops, a school, a bakery, a hospital. It had over 1,000 people living in it. And it was completely invisible to the enemy that hunted them. This is the story of the Bielski brothers, ordinary men who became the leaders of one of the largest and most successful rescue operations of the entire war. They saved 1,200 lives. They did it by refusing to run. Before the war, the Bielski family were millers and farmers in a small village in what is now Belarus. They were Jewish, and they lived among Polish and Belarusian neighbors, in a rural world that had barely changed for generations. There were four brothers who would matter most to this story: Tuvia, Asael, Zeus, and the youngest, Aron. They knew the surrounding forests intimately. They knew every path, every clearing, every place a person might hide. This knowledge, gained from a lifetime of rural life, would one day save over 1,000 people. In June 1941, Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union. The German army swept east, occupying vast territories including Belarus. What followed for the Jewish population of the region was catastrophic. Communities that had existed for centuries were destroyed. Ghettos were established. Entire villages were emptied. For the Jews of Belarus, there was no army coming to save them. There was no place to appeal. It was only the terrible reality that they were being hunted and murdered, systematically, with no one to stop it. In December 1941, the Bielski brothers' parents, along with other family members, were murdered along with the Jews of their local ghetto. In a single act of horror, the brothers lost their mother, their father, and other relatives. The four brothers had survived only because they had fled into the countryside. Now they were fugitives with nothing left. Most people in that moment would have run as far and as fast as they could. They would have tried to survive alone. The Bielskis chose to do something else entirely. The brothers fled into the vast forests they had known since childhood. At first, there were only a handful of them, the brothers and a few relatives who had also escaped. They could have stayed a small mobile group. That would have been the safest choice. A small group can hide. A small group can move quickly. But Tuvia Bielski, the eldest and the natural leader, made a decision that would define everything that followed. They would not simply save themselves. They would save as many Jews as they possibly could. Tuvia Bielski's guiding principle became the foundation of everything the group did. He is remembered for a sentiment that captured his entire philosophy, that he would rather save one old woman than kill 10 enemy soldiers. This was a radical position. Other partisan groups in the forests focused on fighting, on sabotage, on military action, and the Bielski group would fight too when they had to. But Tuvia insisted that their first purpose was rescue. Every life saved was a victory. In a war of extermination, survival itself became the ultimate act of resistance. The Bielskis did something that seems almost unthinkable in its courage. They sent guides, armed men from their own group, back toward the ghettos and villages, deliberately walking into danger to find Jews and lead them into the forest. These guides risked capture and death on every journey. They passed messages, made contact, and escorted men, women, and children through hostile territory to the safety of the trees. Word spread quietly among the desperate. There is a place in the forest, brothers who will take you in. And people began to come. Here was the most extraordinary aspect of the Bielski group. They accepted everyone: the elderly, children, the sick, pregnant women. People who could not fight, could not carry weapons, could not contribute to the group's defense. Other partisan units rejected such people. They were considered a burden, a risk, a liability that could get everyone killed. Tuvia refused. If someone came to the forest seeking safety, they were taken in. No exceptions. This decision made the group larger, slower, and far harder to hide. And it is precisely why 1,200 people survived. As the numbers grew from dozens to hundreds, the Bielskis built something remarkable. Deep in the forest, hidden from roads and patrols, they constructed an entire community. They dug underground shelters called zemlyankas, roofed with earth and branches so they were invisible from above. They built cabins, and then, astonishingly, they built more: a bakery, a mill, a bathhouse, workshops for tailors and cobblers and metalworkers, a school for the children, a synagogue, even a small hospital and infirmary. It was a functioning village, hidden in plain sight. In the Bielski camp, everyone had a role. Tailors repaired clothing. Cobblers mended boots vital in a forest where a man without shoes could not survive winter. Metalworkers repaired weapons. Bakers made bread. Nurses tended the sick. Teachers taught the children because Tuvia insisted that the young must continue learning even here. The message was clear and profoundly human. You are not a burden. You have value. You belong. In a world that had declared them worthless, the forest camp declared the opposite. The four brothers brought different strengths. Tuvia was the leader, charismatic, politically shrewd, the one who set the moral vision and negotiated with outside partisan groups. Zeus was the fighter, aggressive and fearless, who led raids and pushed for military action. Asael was the steady organizer, the one who kept the camp functioning day to day. And Aron, the youngest, was still a teenager, growing up in the middle of it all. Their differences sometimes led to fierce arguments, but together, they made the group work. The winters were merciless. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. The group huddled in their earth shelters, sharing warmth, rationing what little food they had. Hunger was constant. Disease spread. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Finding food for over 1,000 people in a forest, in winter, in occupied territory, was an almost impossible logistical challenge. The group foraged, hunted, and obtained food from surrounding villages, sometimes traded for, sometimes taken by armed groups who needed to feed 1,000 mouths. Survival demanded hard choices. The Bielski group lived under permanent threat. German forces and their collaborators conducted sweeps of the forests, searching for partisans and hidden Jews. Informers in the villages might reveal their location. Any patrol that stumbled upon the camp would mean massacre. The group posted sentries, developed escape plans, and prepared to scatter at a moment's notice. And several times, they had to. When the enemy came in force, the entire community, over 1,000 people, including the elderly and children, had to flee deeper into the swamps and woods, abandoning everything they had built. In the summer of 1943, the Germans launched a major operation against the partisans in the region. Thousands of troops swept through the forests. The Bielski group faced its greatest crisis. Tuvia led the entire community, well over 1,000 people, on a desperate flight into an almost impassable swamp. They waded through water and mud, carrying children and the sick for days. Some died, but the vast majority survived because the enemy could not follow them into that terrain. When the sweep ended, they returned and began rebuilding. Again. Though rescue was their primary mission, the Bielski group was armed and did fight. They conducted sabotage operations, destroying rail lines and disrupting the enemy's movements. They defended their camp. They coordinated, sometimes uneasily, with Soviet partisan units operating in the same forests. Zeus in particular pushed for military action and led fighters on raids. But every operation carried a terrible calculation: retaliation. Reprisals against civilians. The brothers always weighed the cost against the lives they were sworn to protect. The Bielski group faced hostility not only from the enemy, but sometimes from other partisan units. Some Soviet partisans were suspicious of a Jewish group. Some resented that the Bielskis harbored so many non-combatants. There were accusations, tensions, and at times real danger from those who should have been allies. Tuvia's political skill was essential here. He negotiated, made alliances, and maneuvered carefully to keep his community protected. He understood that the group's survival depended not only on hiding from enemies, but on managing friends. What is perhaps most extraordinary about the Bielski camp is that life continued. Amid hunger, fear, and constant danger, children were born. Couples married, there were celebrations, religious services were held, music was played. The camp had a court to settle disputes. In the depths of a genocide, in a forest hideout, a community lived. This was not merely survival. This was the deliberate, defiant assertion of an entire people's right to exist. Every wedding, every birth, every lesson taught to a child was an act of resistance. Hundreds of children lived in the Bielski camp, Some had arrived as orphans, their entire families murdered. They were taken in and cared for by the community. They tended a school in the forest. They played among the trees. They learned to be silent when the sentries signaled danger. Many of them would live long lives, have children and grandchildren of their own, an entire family tree that exists today because 3 brothers refused to turn anyone away. The brothers faced choices no one should have to make. Whether to accept more people, knowing it increased the risk to everyone already there. How to feed 1,000 mouths without provoking deadly retaliation. How to discipline a community living under unbearable strain. These decisions were sometimes harsh. Historians have examined the group's actions with the complexity they deserve. The brothers were not saints, but leaders forced to make brutal calculations in an impossible situation. What is beyond dispute is the outcome. By the summer of 1944, the Bielski community had grown to more than 1,200 people. It was the largest armed rescue of Jews by Jews in the entire war. Think about the scale of it. 1,200 human beings, men, women, children, the elderly, the sick, sustained in a forest, for years in occupied territory, while the machinery of genocide operated all around them, fed, sheltered, defended, kept alive. It remains one of the most remarkable humanitarian achievements of the Second World War. In the summer of 1944, the Soviet army swept west, driving German forces out of Belarus. The forests were liberated, and out of the trees, in one of the most astonishing sights of the war, walked more than 1,200 people. Ragged, thin, exhausted, but alive. Soviet soldiers watched in disbelief as an entire hidden community emerged from the woods where it had lived for years. Whole families, elderly men and women, children who had been born in the forest. All of them alive because 3 brothers had chosen rescue over escape. The story does not end in simple triumph. After liberation, Asael Bielski, the steady, organizing brother who had held the camp together day after day, was conscripted into the Soviet army. He was sent to fight on the front lines against the retreating German forces. Asael was killed in battle in 1945 in the final months of the war. He had survived years of hiding, of hunger, of pursuit. He had helped save more than 1,000 lives, and he died a soldier only months before peace came. He never saw the world his work had made possible. The survivors of the Bielski camp dispersed. There was nothing left of the world they had come from. Their towns were destroyed, their communities annihilated, their neighbors often complicit. Most could never go home. They traveled to displaced persons' camps, and from there to new lives, many to Israel, many to the United States, others across the world. They carried with them the memory of the forest and the knowledge that they had lived only because a group of ordinary men had done something extraordinary. Tuvia Bielski, the man who had led 1,200 people to survival, emigrated eventually to the United States. He settled in New York, and he lived for decades in almost complete obscurity. He worked as a truck driver. He ran a small business. His neighbors, for the most part, had no idea what he had done. He did not seek recognition. He did not write books or give lectures, simply lived quietly, as so many who had done extraordinary things chose to do, carrying his memories privately until his death in 1987. Zeus Bielski, the fighter, also came to America. Together with Tuvia, he built a trucking business in New York. The 2 brothers who had commanded a forest community now worked long hours. In an ordinary trade, in an ordinary city, far from the woods of Belarus, Aron, the youngest, who had been little more than a boy in the forest, also survived and made a new life. The brothers had lost their parents, their home, their entire world. They had also saved more people than most soldiers ever could. Here is the most staggering fact of all. Those 1,200 survivors went on to live full lives. They had children, or children had children. Today, it is estimated that tens of thousands of people are alive in the world because of what happened in that forest. Descendants living in Israel, America, Europe, across the globe. Entire families exist with all their loves, achievements, ordinary joys, because 3 brothers decided in 1942 that they would not leave anyone behind. The Bielski story challenges how we think about resistance. We tend to imagine resistance as sabotage, as combat, as striking back at the enemy. But in a war whose stated purpose was to exterminate an entire people, simply keeping those people alive was the most profound resistance possible. Every child taught in that forest school, every baby born under the trees, every elderly person who lived another winter each was a defeat for those who wanted them erased from the earth. Survival was resistance. For decades, the story of the Bielski brothers was barely known outside the circle of those they had saved. The survivors knew, their families knew, but the wider world did not. It was only later, through the work of historians, eventually through books and film, that the story reached a global audience. Memorials now honor them. Their names are spoken with reverence. Tuvia, Asael, Zuz, and Aron Bielski, 4 brothers from a village that no longer exists, took their place among the most remarkable rescuers in history. The Bielski brothers were not soldiers. They were not heroes by training or by temperament. They were millers and farmers who lost everything and found themselves in a forest with a choice. They could have run, they could have saved themselves. Nobody would have blamed them. Instead, they turned around, walked back toward the danger, and started bringing people out. Their story asks each of us a question we would rather not answer. In their place, with our own families murdered, with the world collapsing, what would we have done? Tuvia, Asael, Zuz, Aron, 4 brothers who lost their parents, their home, and their world, and who responded by saving 1,200 strangers. They built a village where none should have existed. They turned no one away. And they proved that even in the darkest chapter of human history, ordinary people could choose, again and again, to protect life. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts below.